The silence that settled over the house that morning wasn't the comforting hush of a quiet Sunday. It was something else, something heavier, a kind of silence that presses against your chest and dares you to breathe. I opened my eyes at exactly 6 a.m., muscle memory. 42 years of rising with the sun. Thanks to my years as the chief archivist at the Wilmington Historical Library. My name is Eleanor Hart, by the way. I live just outside of Wilmington, North Carolina, in a colonial house my husband restored with his own 2 hands. Usually by that hour, the house would already be alive. The espresso machine would be hissing like a small train. I'd hear Marcus, my son, with his thunderous steps down the stairs, or that unmistakable voice of his fiancée, Lila, shrill and already complaining. Where's my oat milk? Why do we never have the right kind of granola? It used to irritate me. But that morning, that noise was missing. All of it was missing. The air felt strange. Not cold, but thinner somehow, like something had been sucked out of it. I pulled the covers off slowly. My feet found the wooden floors, cold, heart pine boards that my late husband, Walter, sanded and sealed one warm spring in 1992. I remember him covered in sawdust, laughing when I said the house already had enough ghosts. He winked and said, "Let's give them a proper floor to haunt." I tightened my robe as I stepped into the hallway. A chill slipped through me, but it wasn't the kind that came from a draft. No, it was the kind that starts in your bones. At the top of the staircase, I paused. My eyes fell on the spot above the landing, the large canvas of the Cape Fear River at dusk. It had hung there for 20 years, but now, gone. Just a pale rectangle where sunlight hadn't touched the paint. It looked like a ghost had been ripped from the wall. My heart started thumping. Not steadily. Wild. Panicked. I gripped the banister and rushed downstairs, nearly slipping as sweat formed across my palms. I turned the corner into the living room, and my breath caught. I let out a noise, a sharp little gasp, like when you realize you've stepped off the last stair and there's nothing underneath. Gone. The room was gutted. The navy blue velvet sofa, where I used to read bedtime stories to Marcus, the cherrywood coffee table Walter built for our 12th anniversary, the antique globe lamp, the Afghan rugs, even the lace curtains I stitched myself in a burst of post-retirement energy. All of it was missing. The room felt naked, violated. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end. And let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I promise it gets deeper. It gets darker. And maybe, just maybe it gets stronger. I stumbled into the dining room. Empty. The 10-seat dining table that had held every birthday cake since Marcus turned 5, the heirloom china cabinet that held 4 generations of our family silver and stemware, the wedding crystal, all of it gone. No broken glass, no kicked-in door, no sign of forced entry. This wasn't a burglary. It was a surgical removal. Every item, every memory, stripped away like someone had peeled the history right off the walls. I ran to the kitchen. The refrigerator was still there, but the copper pans Walter collected during his trips to Europe, the spice rack I built with my own hands, gone. The pantry stood hollowed out, not just the food, but the containers, the baskets, even the damn labels I printed last Christmas. My knees buckled. I slid to the floor against the cabinets. My phone was in the pocket of my robe. I dropped it twice before I could unlock it. I called Marcus. 5 rings. He answered with wind in the background, and the faint sound of waves and steel drums. "Hey, Mom," he said with a yawn. "Everything okay?" "It's early." My voice barely worked. "Marcus, the house. Everything is gone. The furniture, the silver, the paintings, someone took everything." There was a long, unbearable silence, and then a laugh. "Lila." "Mom," Marcus said, sounding suddenly wide awake. "Relax. Nobody broke in. We liquidated some stuff. That's all." Liquidated. I whispered, the word like acid in my throat. Marcus, that's not some stuff. That's my life. Oh, come on, Mom. Lila chimed in, her voice syrupy and fake. You're always going on about minimalism and mindfulness, and we needed the cash. You know how stressful the wedding's been. We're in Bali, Marcus added cheerfully. It's paradise. You should see the villa. My hand clenched so tightly around the phone it hurt. You sold my home, I said, to drink cocktails in Bali. Stop being so dramatic, he said, with that same tone he used when I asked him to take out the trash as a teenager. You always said experiences matter more than stuff. My whole body was trembling now. Oh, Lila laughed. And don't worry, we'll bring you back something cute, like a sarong or incense or whatever. Then the line went dead. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there on the kitchen floor of my hollowed-out home, staring into the silence. And for the first time in my life, I understood something. Not everyone who lives under your roof loves you. Not everyone who calls you Mom remembers who you really are. My name is Eleanor Hart. I'm 63 years old. I've spent my life preserving stories, archiving history, and keeping my family together. But that morning, something inside me cracked. No, not cracked. Snapped. And what rose in the stillness wasn't a broken mother. It was a woman with steel in her spine and fire in her chest. And if you want to understand why my son could betray me like this, you need to know where it all began. It started on a rainy Wednesday 2 years ago with a knock on the door, to be continued in part 2. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the serpent slithers into the garden. It had rained for hours that Wednesday, fat, relentless drops that turned the garden into a mud patch and made the gutters groan. I was curled up with a wool throw, sipping ginger tea, reading The Secret History for the 3rd time when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Marcus standing there, soaked to the bone in a hoodie and damp jeans, a duffel bag hanging off one shoulder. Beside him stood a woman I'd only seen in Instagram posts. Lila, makeup streaked, arms crossed, absolutely furious that her bangs were curling from the humidity. Hey, Mom, Marcus said sheepishly, giving that crooked smile he used to use after breaking something valuable. We had a little issue with the landlord, he added. Little. Lila huffed, pushing past him into the foyer. He's a monster. It was just one missed payment. Technically. I blinked. You've been evicted. Marcus looked away. Just a misunderstanding. We just need a place for a few weeks. Maybe a month. My heart softened. How could it not? My son. Dripping rain on the hardwood, looking like a boy again. My boy. The one who used to crawl into bed after a nightmare. The one who made me breakfast in bed when he was 6, burned toast and a single strawberry. I stepped aside. Of course, I said. This is your home. The first week was fine. Cozy, even. I cooked. They ate. I cleaned. They slept. Lila spent most of her time in the sunroom, lounging in satin robes, scrolling through her phone, sighing dramatically whenever the internet lagged for half a second. She complained that the sheets weren't Egyptian cotton, that the house smelled old, that my tea collection was cute but kind of grandma, you know? She said it with a laugh. I laughed too, but a little quieter. Marcus wandered from idea to idea, app development one day, podcasting the next. He called it entrepreneurial flow. I called it unemployed. I paid the groceries. I covered the internet upgrades. I replaced the wrong shampoo. And each time I hesitated, Lila would pout and whisper to Marcus. Then he'd come to me, soft-eyed and sweet, and say, Come on, Mom. You always said Dad would want you to support my dreams. That was the knife they used. Over and over. Dad would have believed in me. And God help me, I believed them. But the weeks turned into months. The atmosphere in the house shifted. It was subtle, like a gas leak. You couldn't see it, but it made everything heavy. One night, I heard Lila laughing in the dining room. Why does she keep all these dusty books? She said. She doesn't even read half of them. Honestly, it's selfish. She has all this antique stuff just rotting here while we're scraping for wedding deposits. Scraping? I had just paid for a venue deposit last week. Marcus chimed in with a lazy chuckle. It's the generational mindset. Hoarding instead of helping. I stood frozen in the kitchen, holding a tray of scones I no longer wanted to share. My fingers dug into the ceramic. I almost dropped the whole thing, but I didn't confront them. Not then. Instead, I told myself stories. That they were stressed. That young people are different. That I was imagining things. But something had changed. The warmth in my home had cooled. Like someone had cracked open a window and let in something sour. The breaking point came 3 months before they left for Bali. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I had left the library early to attend a trustee meeting that had been cancelled last minute. I came home to silence again, the kind that prickles your skin. Their voices were upstairs. I stepped softly up the carpeted stairs. My bedroom door was ajar. Inside, Lila stood at my vanity, wearing my necklace, the one Walter gave me the day Marcus was born, a thin diamond chain with a single teardrop pendant. She turned her head this way and that in the mirror, lips pursed, admiring herself. It looks way better on me, she said, smirking. Makes Eleanor look older, like a museum curator. Marcus was sitting on my bed, scrolling through his phone. We should pawn it, she said, casual as ordering takeout. The settings dated, but the diamonds decent. Probably $5,000 at least. He finally looked up. We can't pawn her necklace, babe. She'll notice. She won't, Lila replied with a cruel little laugh. She's getting forgetful. You saw how long it took her to find her keys this morning. She's not, Marcus began. She is, Lila interrupted. And once you get power of attorney, it won't matter. We'll put her in that place near the park. The one with the garden and bingo nights. Then we sell the house. Done. I couldn't move. My own son. Plotting my erasure. Planning my end like a business transaction. I backed away slowly, heart thudding like a drum. I made noise, slamming the front door, so they'd think I was just getting home. When I came up later, the necklace was back in its box. Untouched. But it didn't matter. The trust was broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I crept into the guest study, formerly my reading room, now their office. I found it, a leather-bound planner with gold embossing. On the front, in Lila's spiky handwriting, the Empire Project. Curious, I opened it. What I found inside made my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't a startup business plan. It was a blueprint, a heist. Phase 1, move in, build rapport, gain emotional leverage. Phase 2, financial integration, access credit, utilities, legal documents. Phase 3, liquidate non-essentials, sell antiques, jewelry, artwork. Phase 4, full control, transfer deed, secure power of attorney, facility placement for Eleanor. I stared at the pages for a long time. In the margins, Marcus had scribbled notes. Agreed. She's too soft. Won't fight it. I closed the planner, slowly. My hands trembled, not from fear. From fury. They mistook my kindness for weakness. They didn't know that before I was a librarian, before I was a mother, I was the daughter of a trial attorney for the military. I know how to gather evidence, how to prepare a case, how to win one. I didn't confront them that night. I waited. I watched. I documented. And when I woke up to an empty house and a phone call from paradise, I knew the time for mercy was over. The time for reckoning had come. Stick around for part 3, because the storm hasn't even started yet. And when it hits, it's going to be biblical. I stayed on the kitchen floor longer than I cared to admit. The cold from the tiles seeped into my bones, but I couldn't move. Not yet. The silence around me was deafening. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that rattles in your skull and makes your heart beat louder just to fill the space. The house was hollow. The echoes felt louder than my thoughts. But slowly I got up. Not because I was calm. Because I had work to do. I made a pot of tea, Not the usual chamomile I sip when I'm feeling fragile. No, I made English breakfast. Strong, bitter, black. The kind my father used to drink when he was building a case and had a stack of files to go through. I drank it standing up. I didn't flinch at the heat. Then I picked up my phone. Not to call the police. Not yet. My first call was to Mr. Everett Ashford, our family attorney, an old Southern gentleman with a courtroom voice, a closet full of bow ties, and a steel-trap mind that could unpick a trust like a lockpick in the dark. "Eleanor," he answered, concern heavy in his tone. "You all right?" "No," I said, "but I will be." 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him, in the same leather chair I had once used to sign my wedding documents. He looked at the photos I took of the planner. He read the itemized list of everything missing from my home. He listened to the recording of the phone call from Bali, the way Marcus had laughed when I said the furniture was gone, the way Lila had chirped about bringing me a souvenir. He sat back, jaw tightening. "This is grand larceny," he said finally, "and elder exploitation." He let that hang in the air like a noose. "We can have them arrested the moment they return to the country." I shook my head. "No," I said, calm as the sea before a hurricane. "That would be too quick, too easy. They'd cry and twist the story. They'd make people pity them." I leaned forward, voice cold now. "I don't just want justice, Everett. I want clarity. I want consequences. I want them to understand the weight of what they tried to take from me." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "So what's your plan?" "First," I said, "we evict them. Lock, stock, and memory." For the next 3 weeks, I did not grieve. I got to work. I hired a forensic locksmith. Every lock in the house, every door, every window was changed. They even replaced the garage code, the attic latch, and the cellar hatch. I installed a new security system, high definition, motion sensor, with audio. Then I went to the bank and moved everything, my savings, my pension, every account, into a new institution under a different trust. One Lila would never find. One Marcus could never touch. I created a new will. This time, there were no gray areas. If I died, or if they tried to claim I was incompetent, my estate would go to the Heart Foundation, a nonprofit I would build myself, dedicated to helping elderly women reclaim their lives and protect their assets. Marcus? He was left out entirely, unless he met a list of requirements so specific, so airtight, it might as well have been written in Morse code. Then I turned my attention to their things. They had left the guest rooms full. Clothes, shoes, laptops, expensive gadgets, a whole vanity filled with skincare products I couldn't pronounce. I didn't toss it out. No, that would have been emotional. I was methodical. I hired a moving company, told them to pack everything carefully, label each box, photograph it all. I had it all moved to the old carriage house behind the garden, a small brick structure we used for garden tools and Christmas decorations. No heating, no insulation, no welcome mat. Then I went into Staples and had something printed. A large poster, actually 3. I took the pages of the Empire Project, the notebook Lila wrote, where she plotted out every step of her betrayal, and enlarged them to poster size. Phase by phase, bullet point by bullet point. I hung the pages on the walls of the carriage house, a little gallery of treachery, so that when they walked in to get their stuff, they'd see it, their own words, framed by their own downfall. And then, finally, I focused on myself. I got a haircut, chin length, sleek, modern. Gone was the soft braid I'd worn for years. This new look made my reflection stare back with clarity. I bought new clothes, sharp cuts, clean colors. I wore confidence like armor. No more cardigans, no more soft corners. On the 21st day, I was ready. I sat in my new armchair, a simple piece I bought myself from a local artisan, and waited. The living room was quiet now, echoing. But this silence, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't haunted. It felt like the house was breathing again. Without them. At exactly 4:08 p.m., the taxi pulled up. I didn't move. I watched the feed from my security monitor. Marcus stepped out first, tan, smiling, relaxed. His shirt unbuttoned halfway down. Lila followed, in a flowing sundress that probably cost more than my monthly bills. They laughed as they pulled their suitcases up the steps. Then, the sound of keys scratching against the lock. Jiggling. More scratching. Then the doorbell. I waited. Let them ring it again. And again. Only after the third time I stood, walked calmly to the door and opened it. Marcus blinked behind his sunglasses. "Mom? Something's wrong with the lock," he said, half laughing. "We've been out here forever." "Eleanor," Lila snapped. "Move. I need the bathroom." That flight was... "You can't come in," I said. They both stared. "What?" Lila laughed. "Move, Eleanor. You don't live here anymore." I smiled, not kindly, and that is where part 4 begins. You think this was satisfying? Wait until you see what Eleanor says next. The reckoning isn't over. It's just getting started. "You don't live here anymore." I said it calmly, quietly, but the words hit harder than if I'd shouted them. Marcus let out a confused laugh, as if I was joking, as if this was all some elaborate prank. "Come on, Mom," he said, shifting his suitcase. "You're being weird." Lila scoffed. "Weird? Try insane." She stepped forward and reached for the doorframe. "Move. You're seriously standing in the doorway like some guard dog." I didn't budge. "You can't come in." Her mouth fell open. She blinked. "You're kidding." I folded my arms. "You sold my furniture. You sold my art. You took heirlooms that belonged to 4 generations of women in this family and traded them for cocktails on a beach in a country you can't even pronounce." "That's not fair," Marcus said, his voice suddenly sharper. "We didn't steal anything. We just borrowed against the future, against my inheritance." "You're not inheriting anything," I said, my voice like frost on glass. "Not anymore." He blinked. Lila turned red. "You're bluffing." "I'm not," I said, stepping onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind me with a click. The new lock slid into place with a final mechanical sigh. I changed the will. I changed the trust, the accounts, the deed, everything. "You what?" Lila gasped. "Your belongings," I continued, "have been packed and moved to the carriage house." "The carriage house," she shrieked. "That moldy little shack with spiders." "My Gucci bags are in there." "You're lucky they're not in a dumpster." Marcus's face was turning pale now, the tan from Bali fading in real time. "Mom, please, be reasonable. We're your family. We had nowhere else to go." "No," I corrected him. "You had everywhere to go. You had a home. A warm, beautiful home full of memories and safety. You chose greed." "I didn't," Marcus's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Lila, she just—" "Oh, don't you dare," Lila snapped. "Don't you dare pin this on me." She lunged toward me, her face contorted, eyes wild. "You psycho witch. You sneaky old hag. I'll sue you for this. You're mentally unstable." I didn't flinch. Instead, I simply pointed up at the small black camera mounted in the corner of the porch ceiling. "You're being recorded, and I have the best attorney in this town on retainer. Say one more word, and I'll have you in handcuffs before sunset." Lila froze. Her eyes darted to the camera, then to Marcus. She saw it then, the truth. The game was over. There was no bluff, just a door they could no longer open. Marcus looked at me, really looked, searching, hoping. "Mom, please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to do this. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. She made me." "She didn't make you do anything," I said, staring him in the eyes. "You chose this. You let it happen. You watched it happen." His lip quivered. "I'm sorry." I know, I said softly, but sorry doesn't unlock this door. I turned, pulled the key from my pocket, and placed it into the lock. Mom. I love you, Marcus. He paused, surprised. I love you enough to let you grow up. Then I walked inside, and I locked the door behind me. I stood there, leaning against it, hand resting on the doorknob as silence returned. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I turned on the monitor and watched as they stood on the porch, stunned, lost, like tourists who missed the last train. Lila stormed down the steps, dragging her suitcase. She was shouting at Marcus, shoving him, hitting his chest. He didn't respond. He just sat on the grass, head in his hands, and I wept. I slid to the floor, back against the wood, and cried harder than I've cried in years. Not from weakness, from grief. Grief for the son I raised. Grief for the boy who brought me dandelions and cried when his hamster died. Grief for what I thought we had. But I didn't open the door, because sometimes love means not saving them. Sometimes it means letting them face what they've done. That was 5 years ago. The first year, it was agony. Every morning I'd reach for 2 coffee mugs, and remember I only needed one. Every holiday felt like a wound that never scabbed. But slowly, the house began to breathe again. And so did I. And in part 5, you'll see what happened next. Because my story didn't end there. It started there. The first night after I locked them out, the house felt hollow. The rooms echoed, not just with sound, but with memories. I passed the empty space in the hallway where the Cape Fear River painting used to hang, and had to clutch the banister to stay upright. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the imprint of Walter's body that still lived in the mattress. I whispered his name, and I waited for the tears. They came slowly, not like a flood, but like a slow leak from a pipe behind a wall. You don't notice it until the whole structure feels soggy inside. In the mornings, I walked past the guest rooms, instinctively reaching to knock before realizing there was no one there to wake. At breakfast, I found myself placing 3 spoons beside the sugar bowl. I only needed one. Every task hurt. Folding laundry, watering the garden, hearing a voice in the distance that sounded like Marcus and turning my head before remembering. No, he's not coming home today, or tomorrow, or maybe ever. But I didn't go back to who I was. The Eleanor that tolerated too much, who softened every confrontation, who made tea instead of setting boundaries. That Eleanor was gone, and something new had begun to bloom in her place. It started with a phone call from a woman named Carol. She was a friend of a friend, someone I barely knew. She'd heard about what happened. Whispered rumors travel fast in towns like Wilmington. She said, "I think you're brave." I laughed. Brave? I sat on the floor and cried for a week. "No," she said gently. "You said no. You drew a line. You saved yourself." Then she told me her story. Her daughter and son-in-law had drained her retirement account over 3 years, little by little. She didn't even know until the bank called about suspicious charges for luxury rentals and crypto investments. She never pressed charges. She was too ashamed. That call turned into coffee. That coffee turned into a small meeting of 5 women, each with stories so similar they could have been pages from my own planner. Their children had taken from them. Their trust had been turned into currency. Their kindness had been repackaged as weakness. And in every story they had stayed silent, because no one talks about it. No one warns you. You raise them. You love them. You give them everything. And one day, they look at you like an ATM with a heartbeat. That meeting became a group. That group became an organization. And within a year, the Phoenix Initiative was born. A nonprofit for women over 50 who had been financially manipulated or emotionally exploited by their own families. A place to learn, a place to heal, a place to fight back. We offered legal aid, housing support, workshops on boundaries, wills, financial independence, asset protection. We taught women how to rebuild, how to protect what they built. And more importantly, how to stop apologizing for surviving. Please tell me in the comments, has your heart ever broken like that? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because none of us are alone in this. Not anymore. Of course, I still heard whispers about Marcus and Lila. Small towns don't forget easily. They stayed in a motel for a few nights, burning through the last of the Bali cash. Then a grim basement apartment on the edge of town. Lila left within 2 months. No more money. No more luxury. No more interest. She tried to date some tech executive who was in town for a conference. But her reputation? It followed her like the smell of smoke. The last I heard, she was working as a hostess in a dive bar down in Myrtle Beach, and looking a decade older than she really was. As for Marcus, he disappeared for a while. I don't mean that dramatically. He just stopped showing up in the world I knew. No social media, no phone calls. But then the letters started coming. The first arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single page. "Dear Mom," it said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to be a man you could be proud of. I'm working now. Construction. I come home with blisters. And I think about Dad's hands. I think about everything you gave me. And I'm ashamed. I miss you. I really, really miss you." I held the letter to my chest, and I wept again. But I didn't reply. Not yet. More letters followed. Every month. Updates about his life. His job. The night classes he started taking to finish his degree. The food bank where he volunteered on weekends. He never asked for money. He never asked to come back. He just wanted me to know he was trying. 1 year after Bali, on a Tuesday afternoon, I was trimming my azaleas when I saw a man standing at my garden gate. Tall. Thinner. His skin tanned from the sun. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, and his hands were rough, his nails short. "Hello, Mom," he said. I put down the shears. He didn't step forward. He just stood there. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said quickly. I wanted to see you. You look good. Strong." I looked at him for a long time. I didn't see the boy who betrayed me. I saw a man. One who had been humbled. Who had suffered. Who had grown. "You can come onto the porch," I said at last. He smiled. A real one this time. Not smug. Not polished. Just grateful. I brought out 2 glasses of lemonade. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat in the rocking chairs and watched the garden sway in the breeze. He told me about his life now. He wasn't rich, but he was clean, honest, earnest. He never asked to move back in. He knew that door was closed. He just wanted me to know he'd become someone different. That night I opened a box. Inside were all the letters he'd sent. Every envelope. Every page. I kept them all. Because somewhere deep down, I always hoped he'd find his way back, not to my house, but to himself. And he had. In part 6, the final part, we bring this story full circle. You'll see how a broken home becomes a sanctuary, how forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and how love, real love, sometimes begins after the heartbreak. 5 years. That's how long it's been since I stood on my front porch and told my son he no longer lived here. Since I locked the door, not just to a house, but to an old version of myself I had clung to for far too long. The Eleanor who forgave everything, who bent over backward to make everyone comfortable. She's gone now. What remains is someone stronger, sharper, quieter maybe, but still full of love. Only now I know where to place it. The house looks different today. The furniture is new, sleek, comfortable, chosen by me. The old lace curtains have been replaced by linen ones that breathe with the breeze. The walls don't echo anymore. They hold peace. My garden's in full bloom again. Azaleas, hydrangeas, lavender climbing along the fence line. The silence in the house? It's different now. It no longer hurts. It feels earned. Owned. I sit on the porch most evenings with a book and a glass of sweet tea, watching the sun fall slowly behind the trees. And sometimes, only sometimes, I feel Walter beside me, not in a ghostly way, but in the weight of his lessons, his steadiness, his patience, his quiet kind of justice. He would have been proud of me. Last week, I celebrated my 67th birthday. The doorbell rang just after lunch. It was Marcus. He stood there holding a small gift bag and wearing a look that was both hopeful and unsure. "I brought something," he said, shy as a boy again. I opened it slowly. Inside was a watercolor painting, a little clumsy. The lines weren't perfect, but I knew the image instantly. The Cape Fear River at sunset. "It's not great," he laughed nervously. "I took a class. I remembered how much you loved the painting that used to hang in the hallway." I stared at it for a long moment, my throat tightening. "It's perfect," I said. "I hung it that evening, in the exact same spot. It doesn't look like the old painting, but it doesn't need to, because it means more. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't rare. It was made by hand, with effort, with regret, with love. That makes it priceless." People still ask me, sometimes, if I regret what I did, if I regret kicking my own son out onto the street, if it was too harsh. And I tell them this. Love isn't soft all the time. Love isn't always comfortable. Sometimes love is a line in the sand. Sometimes you save someone by letting them fall. And sometimes you have to burn the whole forest down to allow anything new to grow. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because I loved him enough to stop enabling him, to stop feeding the part of him that took and never gave, to stop protecting him from the consequences he desperately needed to face. And yes, it broke my heart, but it rebuilt his. And now, he's not perfect, but he's real. And more importantly, he's free. He lives in a tiny apartment downtown, works with his hands, paints in his spare time, sends me photos of his meals, and asks for tips on roasting vegetables. We don't live under the same roof anymore, but we live in the same truth now. That love must be earned, maintained, protected. And me? I live in a house that is filled with laughter from my women's group meetings, with stories from survivors who refuse to be erased. I walk through these rooms every day with my head held high, because I saved myself. And in doing so, I saved my son. The cracks in our lives, they didn't ruin us. They became part of us. They became gold. Have you ever had to break someone's heart to save their soul? Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because you deserve peace. You deserve protection. You deserve the last word in your own life story. And me? My name is Eleanor Hart, and I was never just a mother. I was never just a widow. I am a survivor, and I absolutely refuse to be erased.